David and Goliath, the complete story. Young David tended his father's sheep in the green fields of Bethlehem, playing his harp peacefully. The melodies drifted across the hillside as the flock grazed contentedly under his watchful eye. One day, David bravely fought off a lion that threatened his flock, showing courage beyond his young years. The fierce predator had come to attack the sheep, but the shepherd boy stood his ground and protected what had been entrusted to him. Then Jesse, David's father, called his youngest son from the fields to send him on an important mission. The time had come for David to leave his peaceful pastures and venture to where his older brothers served. David received provisions and began his journey to visit his brothers serving in King Saul's army. Walking through the valleys, David carried bread and grain for his 3 older brothers at war, traveling the dusty roads toward the battlefront. David arrived at the Israelite camp and saw soldiers lined up facing the Philistine army across the valley. He found his brothers among the warriors and delivered the food his father Jesse had sent. Suddenly, David heard a terrifying roar echo across the valley, making every soldier tremble with absolute fear. A giant warrior stepped forward from the Philistine lines, towering over 9 feet tall and heavily armored. This was Goliath, and he mocked the Israelites daily, challenging any warrior to face him in single combat for 40 days. Day after day, the giant's voice thundered across the valley, and day after day, not a single Israelite dared to answer. David watched as Goliath shouted insults, and every Israelite soldier backed away in complete terror and fear. The young shepherd boy asked the soldiers why no one would offend Israel's honor and God's name. David's oldest brother Eliab angrily scolded him, telling the boy to return home to his sheep immediately. But David insisted someone must fight, declaring that this giant had defied the armies of God himself. Word reached King Saul that a young shepherd boy was willing to face the mighty Goliath in battle. David stood before King Saul, confidently stating he would fight the Philistine giant without any fear. Saul doubted David's ability, saying he was too young to fight this experienced warrior who killed ruthlessly. But David told how God had helped him kill lions and bears that attacked his sheep in the wilderness. He declared that the same God would deliver him from this uncircumcised Philistine who mocked Israel. Saul agreed and dressed David in royal armor, a heavy bronze helmet and protective coat of mail. David tried walking the armor, but could barely move under its crushing weight and bulk. He removed all the armor, saying he could not wear what he had not tested in real battle. David picked up only his wooden shepherd's staff and a simple leather sling from his shepherd's bag. He walked to a flowing stream and carefully selected 5 smooth stones from the clear running water. David placed the stones in his shepherd's pouch and walked toward the Valley of Elah courageously, ready to face the enemy of God's people. Goliath saw young David approaching with just a staff and laughed mockingly at the Israelite armies. The giant roared insults, saying David treated him like a dog by coming with mere sticks. Goliath cursed David by his pagan gods and promised to feed his flesh to wild birds. But David shouted back fearlessly that he came in the name of the Lord God of Israel's armies. He declared God would deliver Goliath into his hands, so all would know Israel's God lives. David proclaimed this battle belonged to the Lord, not to swords, spears, or any human strength. The young shepherd ran quickly toward the battle line to meet the advancing Philistine giant head-on. David reached into his bag and pulled out one of the 5 smooth stones he collected earlier. He placed the stone carefully into his sling and began spinning it rapidly above his head. With perfect aim and timing, David released a stone which flew straight toward the giant's forehead. The stone struck Goliath's forehead with tremendous force, sinking deep into his skull bone instantly. The mighty giant staggered backward, his eyes rolling up as he lost consciousness and strength completely. Goliath crashed face down to the ground with a thunderous impact that shook the entire valley floor. David ran to the fallen giant, stood on him, and drew Goliath's own massive sword. With Goliath's sword, David cut off the giant's head, securing Israel's victory over their greatest enemy. David held up Goliath's severed head high, and the Israelite army erupted in victorious shouts and cheers. The Philistine army saw their champion was dead and fled in panic across the valley desperately. Israelite soldiers chased the fleeing Philistines, shouting battle cries as they pursued their terrified enemies relentlessly. The warriors plundered the Philistine camp, taking their tents, weapons, and all valuable supplies they had abandoned. David carried Goliath's massive head to Jerusalem as a trophy of God's power over Israel's fierce enemies. King Saul watched David return and asked whose son this brave young warrior could possibly be. David was brought before the king, still holding the giant's head, blood staining his simple shepherd's clothing. Saul's son Jonathan met David, and their souls were knit together in deep friendship and mutual respect. Jonathan gave David his own royal robe, armor, sword, and bow as tokens of their covenant friendship. The people of Israel celebrated their victory, singing songs and dancing throughout all the cities joyfully. Women came out singing that Saul had killed thousands, but David had killed tens of thousands. King Saul grew jealous and angry at David's popularity, and his mood darkened with suspicious thoughts. David served in Saul's court faithfully, playing his harp to soothe the troubled king's dark spirit. Whatever task Saul gave him, David completed successfully, and all the people loved him more greatly. David led military campaigns with wisdom and courage, winning every battle through God's faithful guidance and strength. The shepherd boy who trusted God became a mighty warrior and leader in all of Israel. David's faith taught Israel that victory comes not from size or strength, but from trusting God. His courage inspired generations to face their giants with faith rather than fear or human weapons. God's promise to make David king began unfolding, though many challenges and trials still lay ahead. The shepherd, the giant slayer, the worship leader. David's story showed God uses ordinary people for extraordinary purposes. This is a timeless story of David and Goliath, a tale of faith conquering fear, of divine strength overcoming human impossibility, and of a young shepherd boy who trusted God and changed the course of history.